In the San Fernando Valley, about 16 miles north of Los Angeles, California, a young woman was driving along, listening to soothing music while occasionally glancing at messages on her phone. Unaware of the danger ahead, she was suddenly caught in a massive landslide. In mere seconds, her car was swept off the road by a powerful force and tumbled uncontrollably down a steep ravine. Just when it seemed she would plunge to her death, fate intervened. A large boulder and some ancient tree branches stopped the car just in time, saving her from the jaws of death. The girl struggled to find her phone and managed to send out a faint distress signal. The brave hero was none other than Jay, a former soldier who had once carried out rescue missions in Afghanistan. After leaving the military, he chose to return to Los Angeles to continue the aerial rescue work he loved. Over the years, he had successfully saved. After receiving the distress signal, Jay quickly piloted his helicopter to the San Fernando Valley. However, the narrow canyon made it difficult for the helicopter to approach the scene. Drawing on his extensive experience and expert flying skills, he circled above the car, looking for an opportunity to carry out the rescue. Finally, Jay skillfully used a side approach to keep the helicopter hovering close to the cliff face. The cameraman and reporter on board watched the heart-stopping rescue unfold, visibly tense and frightened. Meanwhile, the rescue team moved quickly, using ropes to secure the car. However, due to the car's downward momentum, one of the rescuer's arms got trapped, and the helicopter began to shake from the excess load. In that split-second moment of life and death, Jay didn't hesitate. He slid down the rope and pulled the girl out of the car. Then, without delay, he ordered his team to cut the rope, letting the vehicle plunge down the cliff. Once again, he had successfully completed a daring rescue mission. At a lecture at the California Institute of Technology, Professor Lauren Hayes was sharing his in-depth knowledge of earthquake with his student. One curious student asked whether the San Andreas Fault could trigger a major earthquake. The professor patiently explained that the fault typically causes a significant earthquake in California, approximately every 150 years. However, now, after more than 100 years of calm, the timing of the next major earthquake remains a mystery. After class, Dr. Kim showed Professor Lauren Hayes seismic data that recorded 23 minor earthquakes within 24 hours in Franco, Nevada, with magnitudes ranging from 2.0 to 2.6 on the Richter scale. That location is just 5 miles from the Hoover Dam. They believe that if they could gather more data on the amplification of pulse signals, they might be able to prove their earthquake prediction theory correct. The two of them quickly brought their specialized equipment to the dam. After a series of tests, they were thrilled to discover that their theory perfectly matched the real-world data. However, just as they were about to celebrate, the device suddenly detected a powerful pulse signal, warning of an imminent major earthquake. At the same time, the dam began to shake violently, and cracks rapidly spread across its surface. Dr. Kim had just announced that an earthquake was coming when the ground started to tremble. The data now showed the magnitude had jumped to 7.1 on the Richter scale. Professor Lauren Hayes urgently told Dr. Kim to get out of there, and immediately began helping with the evacuation. The townspeople, following Professor Lauren Hayes' instructions, fled from the dam, now marked by death. As he coordinated the evacuation, Professor Hayes anxiously looked back, waiting for his longtime colleague, Dr. Kim. Just then, another powerful earthquake struck. Dr. Kim was running away from the dam, holding a child in his arms, when the structure began to crack and collapse. Realizing he could no longer escape, Dr. Kim quickly threw the child toward Professor Lauren Hayes in a final act of heroism. One of Dr. Kim's legs had been pierced by a steel bar, making it painfully clear that he would never make it out of the dam alive. Professor Lauren, witnessing his longtime friend in such a dire situation, rushed forward to help, only to be stopped by Dr. Kim. He didn't want to see another person die alongside him in this devastating natural disaster. Moments later, a massive tsunami struck, shattering the dam completely. Now, Kim was swept away and lost his life. After everything, only Professor Lauren Hayes remained, standing on the edge of survival, stunned by the scene before him, and heartbroken as he watched his brilliant colleague, who had stood by his side for so many years, swallowed by the raging floodwater. After completing a tense rescue mission, Jay planned to spend some relaxing time with his family. However, upon returning home, he was met with divorce papers from his wife. Emma, his wife, had started a new relationship with a company executive named Daniel. That evening, Emma and their daughter Blake were scheduled to have dinner with Daniel. Jay was overwhelmed with a sense of loss. He flipped through old family photos, reminiscing about the happy moments they once shared. Now, he was left alone to face silence. Just then, Jay received an order to report to the Hoover Dam for an emergency rescue operation. Meanwhile, Daniel took Blake to San Francisco for a conference, with plans to stop by a stadium on the way to watch a volleyball game. Professor Lauren Hayes returned to his lab, still immersed in the grief of losing Dr. Kim, unable to move past the tragedy. At that moment, a reporter came to visit him, insisting that Dr. Kim's sacrifice should be acknowledged and that their earthquake prediction research must be made public. Just as the professor was about to go public with the finding, his assistant rushed in with the latest monitoring data. It turned out that new anomalies had appeared near the San Andreas Fault, immediately triggering Lauren's alarm. He realized that the fault line from San Andreas to the Hoover Dam aligned exactly with the flow of a nearby river. The river had actually been formed by the shifting of tectonic plates. This meant that the river marked the boundary between continental plates. The entire state of California sits on the edge of these tectonic plates, and the recent anomalies were clear signs of impending plate movement, warning of a massive, unprecedented earthquake about to strike. At the same time, Blake and Daniel arrived at the Raddick building in San Francisco. Daniel had an important meeting to attend, so he left Blake waiting in the lot. There, Blake unexpectedly met Taylor, who was there for a job interview as an engineer, and his cheerful, energetic younger brother. brother, Ollie. Before heading upstairs for his interview, Taylor specifically told Ollie to behave and not cause any trouble. However, Ollie and Blake quickly hit it off and started chatting with Eve. Elsewhere, Emma was meeting Susan, Daniel's younger sister. Susan, known for her blunt personality, made a rather insensitive comment about the unfortunate fate of Emma's second daughter, which left Emma feeling deeply uncomfortable. At that moment, Emma received a phone call from Jay. Jay apologized for the harsh words he said during their meeting the day before and spoke with Emma about their daughter's perspective on their divorce. Suddenly, the entire building began to shake violently. The massive earthquake struck without warning. Jay, knowing that Emma was at the rooftop restaurant, immediately urged everyone to evacuate to the top of the building and told them he would come to rescue her as soon as possible. But just how powerful was this earthquake? According to Professor Lauren Hayes' data, the entire San Andreas Fault was shaking violently, and the tremors were rapidly spreading towards San Francisco. In San Francisco, Blake had just said goodbye to Taylor and Ollie, getting ready to leave with Daniel from the underground parking lot. However, the earthquake struck suddenly, without any prior sign. Daniel's driver stayed calm and decisive, quickly starting the car and speeding out of the structure. However, the underground parking structure suddenly cracked and collapsed, causing the car to plunge straight down to the second basement level. The driver was killed instantly, and Blake's leg was trapped under the vehicle, leaving her unable to move. Daniel, extremely worried and panicked, decided to go outside and look for help. But when a large slab of concrete suddenly fell nearby, he became terrified and fled in panic, no longer concerned about Blake. At that moment, Taylor and Ollie saw Daniel emerging alone without Blake, and immediately realized that she might still be trapped inside the park garage. From the helicopter above, the entire city appeared to be violently shaking, as if a giant monster was rampaging beneath the earth. Emma, meanwhile, was desperately running toward the rooftop to escape the danger. The intense tremors made her feel briefly dizzy. She saw Jay struggling fly toward her, but the scene unfolding before her made it clear that conventional rescue methods were no longer effective. The building opposite was swaying and on the verge of collapse. In that split second of life and death, Emma didn't hesitate. She jumped. Fortunately, she landed on a rescue net and narrowly escaped disaster. Meanwhile, Blake was in utter despair in the underground parking garage. She hurriedly called her father, but before she could finish her sentence, the signal was lost. Jay, though anxious and ready to begin his rescue mission, still needed a bit more time to get there. Just as Blake was feeling the most hopeless and helpless, Taylor and Ollie arrived. Risking their own lives and knowing the building could collapse at any moment, they skillfully used a jack and punctured the tire to free Blake from her predicament and helped her escape the dangerous structure. Although the earthquake seemed to have subsided, Professor Lauren Hayes quietly realized that this was only the prelude to a greater catastrophe. He immediately began to relay this vital information to everyone. Blake found some materials and communication equipment in a store and managed to assemble a makeshift radio by herself. She and her father agreed to meet at Coit Tower on the hill. As for Emma, after learning that Daniel had abandoned her daughter and fled alone during the moment of crisis, she was furious and immediately texted him to end their relationship. Jay and Emma decided to head to San Francisco right away to rescue their daughter, but their helicopter was no longer able to stay in the air, forcing them to make an emergency landing. Fortunately, thanks to Jay's expert piloting skill, he managed to land the aircraft safely with both of them unharmed. They stole an abandoned car in Coit amidst the chaos and prepared to drive to San Francisco. However, they were soon blocked by a massive fissure caused by the San Andreas Fault, making it impossible to proceed. Fortunately, with the help of a kind elderly couple, they found a crop dusting plane. During the flight, Jay and Emma finally resolved the lingering conflict brought on by the loss of their second daughter, and the two reconciled, restoring their bond. After flying to San Francisco, they couldn't find a suitable landing spot, so their only option was to parachute out. The plane was set to crash directly into the Pacific Ocean once they were ready. The two jumped from the aircraft at thousands of meters high. Thanks to Jay's expert skill, both he and Emma landed safely, and even found the parachute jump to be quite an exhilarating experience. Meanwhile, Professor Hayes' team endured an even stronger earthquake. However, he still believed that the tremors in their area would soon pass, as San Francisco was the real epicenter of the catastrophe. Since Coit Tower had been damaged in the earlier quake, Blake's group had to abandon their original plan and head toward the second highest hill instead. Just then, an even more massive earthquake struck, causing all the high-rise buildings around them sway and teeter on the verge of collapse. Jay quickly took command, directing everyone to seek safe shelter. He soon realized that due to the severity of the earthquake, they couldn't make it through the city to find daughter, but Jay was always quick to adapt. He decided to take a speedboat and circle around to search for Blake. On the other side, Professor Lauren Hayes informed his student that the earthquake had reached a magnitude of 9.6 on the Richter scale, an unprecedented level of intensity. When Jay noticed the seawater along the coastline receding rapidly, he immediately knew that a tsunami triggered by the earthquake was about to strike. Blake also received the tsunami warning and decided to take shelter in a building designed and constructed by Daniel. Despite his questionable character, the building was Daniel's most prized architectural achievement, and there was no doubt about its structural impact. As enormous tsunami waves, dozens of meters high, roared toward them, Jay and Emma didn't hesitate. They accelerated the boat straight into the surge. Jay, overwhelmed with worry for his daughter, pushed the speed to the limit, desperate to reach her and pull her back from the brink of death. Just then, a massive cargo ship, carried by the waves, suddenly loomed in their path. Fortunately, they managed to steer away just in time, narrowly avoiding a catastrophic collision. However, Daniel on the Golden Gate Bridge wasn't so fortunate. The massive ship collided with the bridge, and in an instant, Daniel was swept away along with several workers. The tsunami quickly submerged the entire city of San Francisco, leaving no one able to escape the disaster. Blake, Taylor, and Ollie took shelter inside a building. This building, together with surrounding structures, formed a protective triangle that successfully withstood the tsunami's powerful impact. After the wave passed, Jay and Emma anxiously searched through the debris for their daughter. At that moment, Ollie spotted them. Blake quickly used a laser pointer to send a signal. Jay saw the green dot from the boat, turned around, and realized his daughter was right behind him. However, just as they were overwhelmed with joy, the sturdy building suddenly began to sink. Blake's group was swept into the water. Watching the scene unfold, Jay felt as though he were reliving the tragic moment when his second daughter died. He swore to protect his daughter at all costs. He dove into the water and found her nearly unconscious from lack of air, but standard rescue methods were no longer possible. Jay roared with determination, using every ounce of strength he had to repeatedly smash the door. In the end, Jay managed to rescue Blake. At that moment, the building was on the verge of collapsing, and they needed to break through the glass wall to escape. In a critical moment, Emma rammed the speedboat into the wall, saving everyone just in time. The once sturdy and seemingly indestructible building finally came crashing down. Jay continued performing CPR on his daughter, but Blake showed no signs of response. Just as he was about to lose all hope, Blake finally came back to life, and the family was reunited. Though the entire city had been reduced to rubble, as long as people survived, hope would always remain. San Andreas stands out as a heavyweight entry in the 2015 Hollywood disaster film genre. With its impressive audiovisual experience and a subtle emotional core, the film achieves a remarkable balance between technical spectacle and heartfelt storytelling rarely seen in similar films. Director Brad Peyton sets San Andreas against the backdrop of a massive earthquake triggered by the San Andreas Fault, weaving apocalyptic imagery with a story of human redemption. The film not only meets audience expectations for jaw-dropping disaster scenes, but also delivers a deep emotional resonance. With over 1,300 visual effect shots, the movie paints an epic-scale catastrophe using IMAX 3D technology to amplify the sense of immersion and dread. The director intentionally downplays scientific accuracy in favor of intense sensory impact throughout the film. The St. Louis Post-Dispatch praised the movie as a visual shock that exceeds endurance, while the straightforward brute force presentation was criticized for relying too heavily on grand-scale spectacle. It perfectly fits the entertainment demands of the disaster genre. However, the film still struggles with genre cliches. The Washington Post criticized its outdated plot, function-driven characters, earthquake logic bent to serve the script, in glaring scientific inaccuracy. But as Shinha Entertainment pointed out, the film draws enough years through its depiction of familial bond and fills logical gap with the magnetic presence of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. San Andreas uses the apocalypse as a mirror to reflect the resilience of family love. While it may not be a cinematic masterpiece, the film proved with precise industrial calculation that when disaster movies move beyond sheer destruction to focus on people holding each other tightly amidst the ruins, they can break free from genre conventions and leave audiences both shaken and hopeful as they leave the theater. The lingering echo of the line, "If the world is falling apart, let's hold on to each other," is perhaps the most valuable gift this disaster tale has to offer. If you enjoyed the recap, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to support Mr. T Recap. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.